The following program is produced by Londonderry residents. The views and opinions expressed are not necessarily the views and opinions of the LACTV staff or its volunteers, and should not be considered an endorsement by CTV20 or its staff and volunteers.
Welcome, Londonderry, on this last day of September to another edition of Concord Conversations. I'm Doug Thomas, one of your state representatives hosting this episode, and also Representative Wayne McDonald, who is our co-host as well. With us this morning, we have a very special guest to talk about a real interesting subject, which is a crisis all throughout New Hampshire, which is the housing crisis. So today we have Matt Mayberry, who is the Executive Vice President of the New Hampshire Builders Association, and Matt's going to tell us some interesting stats and figures and some things that we're trying to do to improve the housing situation in the state. Matt, welcome to our show. Glad to have you here. It's been a pleasure, and we hope that you can shed some light on this housing crisis we have here in New Hampshire.
Absolutely. First of all, I want to thank you both very much for having me on the show. But the part I want to convey to the folks in Londonderry and your friends who are watching is the state owes you a huge debt of gratitude, because what a lot of folks don't know is 2 years ago, the Public Utilities Commission wanted to claw back $76 million of funds that they thought were due to them. And what that did was it affected 4,000 New Hampshire families in the weatherization program. These are the lowest income folks who are our neighbors and our friends. This would have denied them the opportunity to stay in their home longer because they couldn't afford to stay there anymore. You folks, the legislature and the governor and the state senate unanimously said, no, we're the legislature, we decide where that money goes. And you folks unanimously voted to take that money back from the PUC, save 600 jobs in New Hampshire, but more importantly, help 3,500 families stay in their homes longer. So, gentlemen, thank you for the work you do in Concord, because I can't do my job without you doing yours. So, thank you.
Pleasure
Working with you.
Pleasure.
A little bit about the New Hampshire Home Builders Association. We have right now 515 members, and we represent the 27,000 people who work in the residential building trades. And for those who don't think it has a big impact, we did a study recently, and we're $5.4 billion of the state gross product here. We touch every corner, and this is all across the board. So we're in your lives. You see us every day.
That's true, Matt. So from our previous conversation we had this morning, we talked a little bit about some of the stats maybe of why we're in this housing crisis. Matt, do you have, I know you're a stat person, can you, do you have some figures as to just how much is our housing shortage? How many people is it affecting? And maybe some history on why we're not even worse off than we could have been.
Absolutely. I think one thing that COVID showed all of us was that we could work from home. And then when people decided to pick their home, they left New York and Massachusetts, Chicago, and they all came to New Hampshire. So they took a lot of these secondary home markets and scooped them up. We had folks who sold their home in Cambridge for, say, $1.5 million, came to New Hampshire and found a deal at $300,000, $350,000, bought it, put money in the bank, and by doing that, they denied a lot of first-time home buyers the opportunity to get into that market. Right now, the state of New Hampshire is going to be short 40,000 dwelling units by the year, I think it's 2035. So, seems like a long way away. It's really not. So we have folks coming into the state. We have folks who want to stay in the state. And I'm going to be direct. For a lot of municipalities who pass ordinances only allowing 55 plus to live in their communities or their new developments, denying young families the opportunity to enter a community with their children, we're paying the price for that right now. Because they can't afford to stay here, they're commuting to work, they're running up the cost. Right now, rents are out of control. We're looking at doing things like that. And gentlemen, if we don't do something to expand the labor pool within our state, towns like Londonderry, who are doing an amazing job of bringing in companies, bringing in manufacturing, if we don't produce a labor force, those companies will leave our state.
That is something they look at, is the availability of workers.
They sure do.
When they decide whether they're going to move to a state or not. They look at tax structure, they look at labor force and various other similar issues.
They sure do. And now they even, especially now with younger workers, they're not looking at just the job, but the quality of life. Things that you do in Londonderry have been, very substantial in bringing businesses here because you can live close to work, close to, transportation, airports, so on.
Highway access.
Highway access, but also schools and recreation. Companies really are looking at their labor force holistically and not just singular, come work 9 to 5 and go away.
Well, we have a real dichotomy here in a sense because we do need the workforce here. We do need to keep businesses in the state. But I also know that our constituents, particularly here in Londonderry, they enjoy the charm of our neighborhoods. The buildings that we have had happen here lately have put a stress on traffic throughout the town. And I know that our constituents are worried that certain housing developments may result in more traffic, more snarling, take away some of the charm of the local community. How do we avoid that to a large extent and still meet our obligation to provide a workforce for people who want to stay and live in New Hampshire, and hopefully that they come to New Hampshire for the right reason, that is, they want to keep New Hampshire the way it is, and so we need to attract those people as well. How do we accomplish that?
Absolutely. As Governor Sununu says, welcome to New Hampshire, leave your politics at home. Like, don't bring your tax structure here. No sales tax, no income tax, period. And I know the two of you are hugely strong advocates of that.
Right.
But Representative, I think one of the ways to cut down that snarling traffic is finding housing that's attainable, not affordable, but attainable, ATT, close to where they work. Because when you have to commute 40 minutes and you're driving through a town to get to where you're working, we'd all rather have 5 and 10 minute commutes. But if you're trying to live outside of Londonderry, driving into Londonderry to go to work, you are causing more traffic. We have to have diverse economies within our municipalities because also by the same token, you can't have the tax base resting just on residential communities and residential homes. Right. You've got to have retail, you've got to have manufacturing. It's that balance. And you folks as community leaders have to find that balance.
Well, Woodmont Commons is a big step in that direction, if you've been following that development. Tons of commercial stuff going in there, but some residential also. And of course, there's always been the Grenier Field near the airport area where there's been some manufacturing, probably as much as we'd like or need, but we've tried to accomplish that, and the town council's done a great job in that respect. This is a interesting thing that I hear from constituents from time to time, and I don't know if you could address it not only here in New Hampshire in terms of its impact, but nationally. There's a huge concern about immigration, illegal immigration, and New Hampshire has even encountered a certain amount of that because of our northern border with Canada. And there are those who have said to me, well, that contributes to the housing crisis because illegal immigrants are coming in and swallowing up some of this. And I can tell by your face that it's not a strong argument, but where there's a concern out there, perhaps you could address that a bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I'll leave the
And
stuff.
I don't mean to laugh, because immigration is a serious issue for our country.
No.
And our state. But
Immigration is a huge issue for our country, for our state. There is legal immigration, which we all need.
of course, of course.
But if you're an illegal immigrant, you're not signing a lease. You're not going through a credit check. You're not even writing a check to go get a rental. So I would love, matter of fact, I'll pay the first $100 for someone who shows me where someone who is here illegally is renting a home, buying a home, a condominium, tying up any part of the residential community. Could there somewhere be someone who has a 6-bedroom house and they have 12 people living in there? They could. That goes back to zoning, goes back to enforcement. But when we're talking about illegal immigrants coming to New Hampshire and buying housing, that's just not happening.
When I was doing fraud work for Health and Human Services, that was an issue. Landlords would look the other way because they just wanted the money, or they just wanted to, keep the thing occupied.
Yeah.
And it also gave them an excuse not to keep it up because they knew that it was going to get trashed in many cases.
So this is not the case of like in Massachusetts, where the government there is actually housing illegal immigrants into either hotels, motels, condominiums on their own, on the government's dime. That is, so they don't have to worry. The people moving in there don't have to worry about signing a lease or cashing a check. That is not happening here in New Hampshire.
It is not happening here in New Hampshire. The closest we may get is that some community action programs would rent hotel rooms to put the homeless in during the winter time or during severe storms. And for the good that does for some people, from my friends, they've heard that the hotels will only do this once because they come in and those rooms are just trashed. And so you might have made, and Massachusetts, Maura Healey's filling hotels with homeless people. So you might get $5,000 a month for that rent, but you're gonna spend $10,000 redoing the whole room afterwards. So was it really worth it? One thing that we're going to be doing, coming to you gentlemen and the legislature, is what I call the HOPE, H-O-P-E program. It's a Housing Opportunity Program extension. And what this would do, it'd be enabling, so not telling a community what to do, but allowing it to decide their own destiny. But a municipality such as Londonderry would be their own developer. Take town-owned land, work with the state, and through a state grant, put in some infrastructure, a road, water, sewer, septic, whatever it's going to be, small 1/10 of an acre lots on a slab, 3 bedrooms, 1-car oversized garage for storage, 1/10 of an acre, so you have a little bit of a backyard for a grill, a place for the dog to go, more front porches than back decks, and sidewalks, but by deed, it would have to be owner occupied. Because right now we have a problem here in New Hampshire of REITs, R-E-I-T, Real Estate Investment Trust, coming in, buying entire developments and buildings and saying, we'll take all 30 units. Then they're going to crank up the rent, driving the attainability out of there. So with this, you come in, and if you're in law enforcement in Londonderry, a firefighter in Londonderry, a teacher in the Londonderry school system, or a nurse, you could be eligible for a grant from the New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority for up to $10,000 that would help cover your points, closing cost, and prepaid interest. But gentlemen, it's not a giveaway. That it's a 5-year sunsetted grant that if you come into this community and you're part of that program, you get $10,000 towards your closing costs. If you move in the first year, that $10,000 you would have as a grant, you have to pay back $50,000 to New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. If you only have 2 years left on it, it's $20,000. Because I don't want to create an opportunity where someone walks in and says, ooh, this little 3-bedroom cape with an oversized 1-car garage on a 1/10 of an acre, $300,000, we can sell that again for $420,000. We're going to flip it. No way. Because if you do, we're going to take the first $50,000, and that goes right back to the state of New Hampshire. We want to develop communities who live there. Municipalities don't enjoy the transience of rentals. We'll be frank and direct. You want to see neighborhoods. You want to see where a cop, a nurse, a firefighter, a teacher, those who are coming up with young families and those who are old like me and downsizing can live in a community where you know your neighbors. And if the municipality, say Londonderry, does this development, works with the outstanding developers at New Hampshire Home Builders Association, you can take the money from the profits of that sale of those homes, and you could use that to offset your tax rate. You could use it to improve some of your infrastructure. Right. There's nothing wrong with a municipality or a county acting as developer on their land as long as it benefits back to the taxpayers, which it would.
Is this proposal that you're proposing, is this something that you are hoping gets put into some legislation this year? Are you aware of any LSRs that are coming forward?
Yes, sir. We're actually developing that LSR now that we're going to be putting out there for you folks to decide and have a conversation. One thing that we're also doing is we're bringing forward the ADU, the auxiliary dwelling units legislation that was proposed last time. What we're doing is we're working with all the stakeholders, and we're going to bring to you gentlemen and to the legislature a bill that says any single-family home by right has the opportunity to add an additional auxiliary dwelling unit, also known for the folks at home as the mother-in-law apartment.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is the easy way to put it. But our language says that a single-family home can have one auxiliary dwelling unit, ADU. It has to be no more than 950 square feet. It can be attached or detached, and it can have its own electric service. So you can set up, 2 home generators, or they pay for their own bill. This is going to help folks stay in their homes longer, because as much as we try to cut taxes still keep kind of going up. It helps them stay in their homes longer. It provides an opportunity for multi-generational housing. We all need grandma and grandpa to come and babysit the kids. And if they're across the driveway, it makes it even easier.
Right.
So that's going to be coming forward to you because, I'm sorry, Representative, that we've grown really tired of just talking about the issue. We have talked it to death. These plans may not be perfect, but they're a plan.
Right.
We don't need another study committee to say we have a housing issue. We all know
We have
it.
too many study committees now.
We have
right.
way too many study
right.
committees now.
Well, as we discussed earlier, we know that there's at least one LSR in the bin that would like to adopt a newer housing code than what New Hampshire has right now. Would your project address that issue, and what is your feeling on adopting new housing codes?
When the housing codes were brought into, and for the friends at home, my 2 friends are smiling at me because they already know where I'm going to go with this. The housing codes were originally brought in, as you know, Representative, for life safety, safe homes, safe places where you can raise your kids. These were never, ever intended to be a societal vessel to take a societal benefit and a opinion and weaponize it. What's happened now is that our friends on the left have said that they want to bring forward the 2021 Energy Code. What that would do, gentlemen, is it would add at least $17,000 of debt. I'll back up a second. We asked New Hampshire home builders to price out what it would take to go from the 2018 Energy Code to the 2021 Energy Code. Just that. The feedback came back that was about $17,000. Actually, the number was higher, but we took the lowest number we had. We weren't trying to add hyperbole to this. In the state of New Hampshire in 2023, 4,531 building permits were issued in the state for residential units. If you took 4,531 times 17,000, that's $76 million of debt. That's writing a check for $76 million. Right directly on the head of New Hampshire taxpayers, the largest single tax increase we've ever seen, borne by 4,500 individuals. Guess what the payback is in savings on the 2021 Energy Code? I'll just take a wild guess.
Go ahead. Sure.
Wayne?
Go ahead.
It's $500 a year. You don't have to be a math magician to figure out $17,000 divided by $500 a year. The $500 a year was stated by our senior senator on WMUR. Those are her numbers. We said absolutely not. That the New Hampshire home builders will build you anything you want. If you want a net zero home, which means you create the own energy that you use for your home, we'll build it. You want to do an energy efficient home, we'll build it. You got a check, we'll build it. But you should decide what home you want to live in. You should decide where you want your money to go. We believe in the citizens of New Hampshire. We do not need and do not want the federal government coming through and telling us where to live. Our senior senator is pushing through a rule, which doesn't necessarily need to go to the legislature, it's just a rule within the law, directing USDA, Rural Development, the VA, let me back up. She didn't say you shall. She is encouraging them, USDA, Rural Development, the VA, Federal Housing Administration, HUD, and anyone else who gets federal money for a home, FHA, that your home must be built to the 2021 energy codes, making it mandatory that if you're going to get government money, you have to pay $17,000 more for your home. That's wrong. The National Association of Home Builders, will be fighting this in court. We think this is an unfunded federal mandate, and the home builders here in New Hampshire will fight it. And
Well, I know that this goes against what we've been hearing all of last session about the fact that we need more housing, that we're short on housing. Young people can't afford to live here. And yet, what I'm hearing from you is that there are policies trying to be passed at the federal level that would keep the younger people from being able to afford even living in a starter home.
yes,
And so, you're right, that doesn't track, but and I understand what they're trying to do, but like everything else, it's a trade-off, and it seems like the trade-off right now does not favor people trying to afford new homes,
No.
if that were to pass.
And speaking of cost and home costs, federal and federal government issues, we know that federal spending has really created an inflationary problem, which affects the prime rate and the borrowing rate for home buyers. And what is the prime rate right now? Do you know offhand? I don't.
I don't.
I'm sure it's gone up considerably in the last few years,
Yes,
and which again adds to this whole problem.
it sure does. And we've got to look beyond the 5 minutes from now to look 30 years from now. In California, they're having a really hard time getting rid and disposing of old solar panels because of the lithium that's in there. So we don't have the capacity in New Hampshire to dispose of a solar panel. We have to send it out of state to get rid of that. What if we bring forward thousands of them, and 10 years from now, we have to get rid of them?
Well,
How much are we going to pay for that?
It's interesting you bring that up, and I'll only comment briefly on that since we're talking about housing. But I know for a fact, because it was in my committee at least 4 years ago, at least, where we had a bill presented by one of our members to set up a program to handle solar panels when they least end of life, how to dispose of them, and the bill would have even set up a methodology to provide for a fund on how to pay for disposal of solar panels when they would be needed. We were met with great resistance from the other side. They said it wasn't needed, it was too soon, it was too far away, and so that bill died in the House. It just didn't go anywhere. Yet we see the future, that there will be a need sometime soon for how we dispose of those solar
It
panels.
speaks to the problem with government. There's never any long-range planning. It's about what, kicking the can down the road for somebody else to have to worry about, and not worrying about, just trying to address it today on our watch and not for the future. And that was what, that's what happened with that issue you're talking about.
Exactly.
And that's why we're really fortunate to have true leaders like the two of you saying, like, wait, stop. Take a breath. What happens on the back end of this? Because one thing that we are concerned with, and we've talked with the state fire marshal about this, is, and if you folks are at home thinking this isn't going to affect me, it will. Because there'll be legislation coming forward that'll mandate that homes have to go to 400 amp service. Most of you have either 100 amp service or 200 amp service in your home, but you have to go to 400 amp service, so you have to put in an electric car charger in there. I would love to have you bring in someone from the towing association who's going to tell you a tow truck will not put a Tesla or an EV car on a flatbed because the batteries can still self-combust. They burn so hot, they evaporate water before they get to it, they melt the ingredients before it gets to the fire. These are true fire hazards. And our friends on the left want to mandate that you have these in your garage. That's just
Not my
wrong.
garage.
Not my garage.
Getting back to, we only have a few minutes left here, to the housing situation. One thing we haven't touched upon was the fact that rents in this state are way too high. People that can't afford a house, still, I'm hearing from sources, one-bedroom apartments can be as high as $2,100 a month. That's more than I pay for mortgage right now. So in just the few seconds we have left here, can you sum up just some items of what we can look forward to in trying to solve this housing issue from what you've described, and maybe a few more tidbits in the future?
Absolutely. We're going to try to work with the municipalities on zoning. We're going to work with the state to help with some infrastructure, because there are some very real challenges out there with our infrastructure. Wastewater treatment, water, the water capacity, water draws. So we need to look at our entire state. We need to work with the municipalities. The New Hampshire Home Builders Association is dedicated to working with our legislative leaders to create it, but in a sound, maintainable, and sustainable way, so that we don't overburden one community with this issue.
I know at the House, we're talking about restructuring some of our committees, and specifically, this past term, we had a special committee on housing, as you know. The plan is to make that permanent, which will hopefully help this situation also, and address a lot of the concerns.
It'll give it the permanency that it deserves, because this is not a 2-week problem. This is a 20-year problem.
Right.
Okay. Final words, Matt, from you?
Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to your friends in Londonderry. I love Londonderry, great community. We're working together. Please, if you hear rumors, if you see things out there, call us. My cell number is 603-969-7077. I'll always answer it. It's in my pocket right now. That if you hear a myth or hear a rumor, we'll give you the facts. We may agree with you, we may disagree with you, but we'll always give you the best information that we have.
Very good. Well, thank you, Matt. Thanks, Wayne. Again, thank you for tuning in again for the other edition of Concord Conversations. Londonderry, thank you for watching. And again, if you ever have any questions, please feel free to contact myself at doug.thomasnh@gmail.com. And we would like to sign off for another good edition today. Thank you for watching and have a nice week.
Take care.
The preceding program was produced by Londonderry residents. The views and opinions expressed are not necessarily the views and opinions of the LACTV staff or its volunteers and should not be considered an endorsement by CTV 20 or its staff and volunteers.